Hey, Off-Season After Dark fans, welcome back for episode 19. And we took a week off here, the first one we've done, but glad to have a special guest here. We have Topper Talk here to talk about Western Kentucky, one of the teams who I've praised a lot, been one of the most consistent G5 teams in the country. Ty Helton going to bowl games every year, doing a lot of good things there. So glad to have you here. Um, what Tell the people, Moff, where they can find you, how long you've been doing this, and what got you here.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. First of all, you can find us on pretty much any social media platform. I always recommend X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at
Yeah.
@topper_talk, like you have on the scrolling banner there. That's going to
And
be the
I'll
main
I'll tag
place.
you in all of our retweet stuff too, so they'll have easy access to that.
Yeah, so that's the main place to find us. That's the main place where we're updating information, relevant news, stats, all of our episodes, etc. As far as listening to us or watching us, our episodes, we record weekly. We usually put out 2 episodes a week. We do a game recap and we do a game preview episode. And we're on every major streaming platform, audio wise, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find us. And we also do video episodes as well on YouTube at Topper Talk Podcast. We are entering, this is our 4th season of covering WKU sports.
Awesome.
We're not just a football only podcast. We're not just basketball only podcast. We cover every sport, every athlete on campus. We think they all deserve recognition for representing our university. So we're
That's
a year
impressive.
round. Yeah, we're a year round outfit. Sometimes during the summer, June, July, it kind of dries up a little bit, but we try to fill it with, off season content or interviews or getting ready for football season stuff. We've done a pretty good job at filling those dead periods. And I've got here just in this space, I've been doing it for about 7, 8 years total now. I previously was a part of a Marshall podcast, the Moonshine Throwdown that I shared with you earlier, off mic. But when Marshall went to the Sun Belt Conference in 2021, that kind of naturally dissolved that podcast that I was a part of. They spun off and now are doing a very popular podcast over at the Thundercast,
Yeah.
representing Marshall very well. I spun off and started Topper Talk, and kind of here we are. The rest is history, as they say.
Absolutely. That great story. I didn't realize two things: A, that you've been doing it so long, and B, that you covered all Topper sports. That's awesome and great for those student athletes in sports where they might be getting less recognition. So that's awesome. Good to hear. Just jumping into WKU. So, a lot of our regular viewers will know, but kind of one of my niches and specialties, and what I write about a lot for Mike Farrell Sports is the coaching carousel, and how that shakes out, and just coaching in general. Um, you guys have one of the most impressive coaches in the country. Helton has done a fantastic job there. I mean, he's in year 7 now, and only 1 year with less than 8 wins, while also frequently losing coordinators all the time. Um, how do you think? Several questions to unpack here, but in your mind, what's made him so successful and consistent over the years?
I think one of the main keys to his success here at WKU is one, he embraced the transfer portal before it is what it is today. Back
Yeah,
in 19 and 20, he was dipping into the transfer portal
Austin
to
Reed. Yeah,
to find
yeah,
athletes that wanted to come here looking for a fresh start, maybe weren't getting the playing time or looking to move up, and or sometimes SEC guys moving down. He's been a big proponent of the transfer portal before it became the wild wild west that it is
okay,
today. So I think that's key number one. I think the second thing, and I've said this for a long time about Tyson, and you touched on it, we've changed offensive coordinators almost every single year.
yeah,
There's been some holdover offensive coordinators, etc. on some years. But I think one of the underappreciated parts of his coaching tenure has been his ability to find good young coaching talent, get them onto the hill here on staff, and help develop them and get the most out of them that he can while they're here. And several of those guys have now gone on to bigger, better, P4, higher paying jobs. Zach Kitley's head coach at FAU, Ben Arbuckle, obviously from Washington State to Oklahoma. He's going to be a head coach in short order.
Yeah. Crum is at SMU, doing well there.
Exactly.
And it's not only for how well known WKU has been for offense with Kitley, Arbuckle. It's not just that side of the ball. Ty Summers went to Colorado State. Just mentioned Crum at SMU. It's both sides of the ball that he is, losing coordinators to. And I really like what you touched on there of he's getting those young guys and he's developing them. And at that level, you have to almost coach your coaches as the boss and be able to, help those guys develop and grow, knowing I might eventually lose them. But if that happens, it's because we're in a better place and we've succeeded.
Yeah, and I think, one thing that's made that pitch easier is now he can tell them, like, hey, one good year here can change your life. He has said that to coaches. I've heard other coaches repeat that. Come here and have one good year, and the next few years of your life is going to look a lot different than what it does today here at Western Kentucky.
That's a great selling point. Yeah, and I think also with coaches, and you hate to say it too, but with high school recruits now, at whether it's CUSA, MAC, Sunbelt, hey, if you get one or two really good years here, you can bump up to the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, and I think adapting to the current landscape of college football is something he's done extremely well so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think usually that kind of parlays into, how and why have we kept Tyson Helton for, now 7th year here. And I feel like I've had this discussion, in the off season, prior years. It comes up every single year. Why is he still here? And the easy answer to that is he wins enough ball games. He's exciting. He recruits well. We score a lot of points. It's a fun offense. Like you said earlier, it's going to be 8-9 wins every single year. But he's knocked on the door of the conference championship, got there in 21 with Bailey Zappi, got there last year with Caden Veltkamp. Just hasn't – that's the only thing holding him back right now to the fan base. And quite frankly, to his career as it goes forward, he's still a fairly young coach. Until he gets past that barrier of winning a conference championship, he's probably going to remain here at Western Kentucky. I don't see us firing the guy winning 7, 8, 9 games a year, and he's not going to get fired unless we drop down to that 3, 4, 5 win plateau that we saw during our previous coach. So, it's kind of the catch-22 of how good he's been, but not great. You know what you're getting, but just not great yet.
And going back to that top, last off season and interviewing a lot of guys, different conferences all over the country, he's one of the 3 names that topic always came up for. It's Helton, Jason Candle, Jamie Chadwell, of why are they still coaching at this level? Obviously, Liberty's regressed a lot this year, but Helton and Candle have not. And I think every year they're continually going to be in that discussion for when will these guys get another job? Do they want one? Do they want to stay where they're at because they love the place? And that's a great reason to stay if you want to. And I think for Helton and Candle, you have a lot of reasons to stay there. People love them. You're in a place where you're always going to, or most years, you will contend for the Conference USA title, and life's good for you.
Yeah, I know he absolutely loves Bowling Green, Kentucky. So I think, it's not going to be just any situation that pulls him away. And I know we're going to talk about some coaching carousel things later. And, his name's already popping up, in a job or two open. It popped up in a couple last year. It popped up 3 years ago. It's one of those things that it's going to pop up every year. but he's shown that he's not just going to take any job for a paycheck. It has to be the right situation. He really loves Bowling Green, Kentucky. His family loves Bowling Green, Kentucky. He's still got children in high school here. So it's going to take more than just, oh, hey, here's a job opening that's, you could argue, is lateral for a little more pay to uproot and transplant his whole family somewhere else. So I think that also helps in the factor that we've kept him now for 7 years.
Yeah, I think that being aware of all those factors is something you have to do in talking about the movement here, especially in a guy who isn't just looking for the next paycheck. And what some people would just quote as a bigger school. You want to go for the right fit in somewhere where you're going to succeed, which they're doing this year. It's been a great start to the year. They're 5-1 right now. Going back to, they had the week 0 conference game, which is a rarity. Beat Sam Houston, who's really struggling. Toledo, the only team that has beat them, which was on the road, and then beat Nevada, and then 2 good road games against the conference newcomers, who both have impressed in their first year in FBS. Missouri State has done solid, especially considering they've had QB injuries, and Jacob Clark hasn't been playing, and didn't last weekend. And then Delaware, who took WKU right up until the end. That I watched that game, heck of a game to watch. What has went right for them this year? Where for our viewers that haven't been watching as much Conference USA, what are they doing well this year?
I think if you keep up with WKU at all, or even if you don't, that in the last 11 years we've led the nation in passing yards and touchdowns 4 times. Going back to Brandon Dowdy, in 14 and 15, and Austin Reed, Bailey Zappi. We're known for a high flying, scoring, air raid, pro raid offense, whatever you want to call it. This year has looked a little different. The first 3 games of the year, we beat that bad Sam Houston team game 1, scored 40 points. Like, oh man, look really good. But at the time it was like, are we good, or are they just that bad? I think now hindsight has shown, okay, they're 0-6. They're not very good. No. We played an FCS team, North Alabama, did what we should have done, beat them handily. Went to Toledo, which we expected to be a top G5 matchup. It was a bounce back game from last year. We played them in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Came down to the wire. Took an interception. After a crazy lightning storm to seal that game and for us to get that
win.
Right,
I forgot about that. It was last year. Yeah,
it was insane. It was like the tale of 2, not halves, but the storm kind of was a nice break, and we came out and just took the game over. For whatever reason, coming out of the locker room with that hour plus delay. And we went into Toledo and had high expectations, and maybe G5 playoff aspirations that we kind of held in our control, but we knew we had to win that game. And we went in there and we just ran into a buzzsaw. We played our worst possible game, turned the ball over 2 times in the first 5 plays, and we just got ran out of Toledo, basically. And in hindsight, it's not, they've lost a couple games since then, and you're like, man, we played them at their best game and we played our worst game, is what that feels like. And then since then, the first 3 games and the last 3 games for Western Kentucky have looked totally different, in my opinion. We've had to lean more heavily on our run game. I talked about our pass game being our staple. Usually we're scoring 35, 40 points per game. We haven't cracked 30 points in the last 3 games. Now, granted, a lot of that is defenses playing us are adjusting to what they know we want to bring to the table. They know we want to drop back and throw the ball 35 times a game. They know we want to spread it around, get guys in space, explosive plays, short drives. When you got guys that are dropping, 7 guys into coverage, 2 high safeties, basically daring you to run the ball. And that's what we've seen a lot from Missouri State, from Delaware, and from Nevada. We've had to turn around and we've had to lean on our running game a lot more the last 3 weeks. And luckily that pivot that we've been forced into has worked out for us. Our running game has stepped up and has won us some ball games.
With 3 guys all getting significant carries.
Yeah, the running back room is deep. We started a true freshman in Marvis Parrish. Coming into the season, we had a couple fifth-year seniors in George Hart the third and Lavelle Wright. That
Wright's played well. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone assumed one of those two guys was going to be running back 1A and 1B. And, Marvis Parrish was a name I had heard over the spring and summer. I had heard, watch out for this kid. If he gets on the field, he's tough. And he's a great back, but it's nice to have that depth.
Yeah.
He's more of a speed piece.
He impresses me catching passes out of the backfield.
Yeah, he'll make a cut, make you miss, and get upfield. Coming out of the backfield, all three of the guys can catch the ball in the backfield, but he's probably the most dangerous in space. If he gets the ball with a linebacker guarding him, good night. He's going to turn. He's going to get the edge and get up the field. George and Lavelle are more of those power guys. In between the tackles, short, hard yards, goal line type guys. Those are the guys that are going to get the hard yards for you. So it's nice that
we a lot heavy guys too. 215, 220.
Yeah,
so.
It's nice that we've had to pivot due to what the defenses are giving us, and we've been successful at it. At the same time, we've also seen our defense step up. Still not where we want to be run defense wise. We're still number 110 in the nation, I think it is, as far as giving up rushing yards. But it's really been, between the 20s, you're going to move the ball against us. If you're not punching in the end zone, if you're only kicking field goals or you're turning the ball over, that's a win for us because we think that we can go down and outscore you. And that's really been the bread and butter. That's what won the game against Delaware. We've forced a couple of turnovers down the line. We had the turnover right at the goal line, went down for points. That was a huge momentum swing. And then the pick six with Karan Hayward. The defense has done enough to win us ball games. And then we've been able to lean on the running game to help put those games away. So it's looked a little bit different. I think our offense hasn't played up to its potential yet, which, to me, and I've said said this to people on our podcast, people just in general conversation, we haven't played our best football. We've left a lot of, meat, quote unquote, on the bones as far as scoring points, finishing drives, etc. for multiple reasons, whether it's just efficiency, execution, sometimes penalties, getting in our own way, getting behind schedule or just killing a drive. I think we can play better football than what we played right now. And I would rather be playing that better football in the middle end of October and into November than I would in September, October. So I think we're going to continue to grow and clean things up. I think we've seen growth from this team and this offense and even the defense already. And now that we're into the meat of conference play, if that continues, there's not a game on the schedule that's not winnable. The LSU SEC road game, it is what it is. But conference-wise, everything looks winnable. That's for sure.
Certainly does. Yeah. And I think could have one similar to last year where the last regular season game, you could be playing them a week later. There's a decent chance WKU and Jacksonville State make it again to the conference title game.
Yeah, Jack State's tough. I mean, every team, several teams, I won't say every team, but several teams, the ones at the top that have kind of started to separate themselves, they've all looked good. Kennesaw, Louisiana Tech, us, Jacksonville State, Liberty, even when they play their best, they look good. But no teams looked unbeatable.
No. And Liberty started so awful, having high expectations this year. They could still make the conference. They're 1-1 in the conference. They could make the conference title game. It's not unthinkable to, say they'll do that. But one thing you had mentioned, WKU leaning on the defense more. I feel like I can't say I've watched all 6 of their games, but I feel like I watched a lot of Delaware, Missouri State, and then a bit of that opener against Sam Houston. It seems like almost every play when the other team runs, you have Westers making the tackle. He's been a solid, coming from, was it FAU and then Colorado, with brother. He's been a good addition for you guys. He's playing well on defense.
Yeah, Jalen Wester, number 21, if you're watching, he's been solid. I think he's got a pick or two this year. Has forced a fumble, if I'm not mistaken. He's been a solid playmaker for us on the back end. Him and Al-Mahi Ali that transferred from Charlotte. I really felt like our back end, our secondary, the new guys we added to what we had returning in Kent Robinson and DeMarco Williams, really thought that pass defense was going to remain strong. And last year they were, a top 10, top 15 pass defense in
Yeah,
the nation. This year that's regressed a little bit. I think we're still top 50, but it's not top 10, top 20 like it was last year. But overall, it's still good enough to be bend, don't break. It keeps the big plays in front of you, creating turnovers, just having nice, solid, experienced guys on the back end, versus having, young guys that are getting thrown to the fire has been invaluable.
absolutely. Yeah. So it's odd to say this. We're recording this on a Monday. It'll go live Tuesday, but the game tonight against FIU when this episode will drop. Um, what are you looking forward to in that game? I mean, FIU is a team who 2-3. One of their wins, was the season opener against an FCS team. Willie Simmons was one of my favorite hires of the offseason, was a successful FCS head coach. At FAMU was his last spot, and then was Manny Diaz's running backs coach at Duke last year. I think he will be a success there, but there have been some year one, speed bumps as we would expect with everybody. They've lost to Delaware, and then UConn was their most recent game. That Delaware is the only conference game they've played so far. But what are you looking for tomorrow in a game which is at home for you guys?
Yeah, I'm looking for an opportunity for this team to be back home for the first time in a month. It feels like we've been on the
Yeah,
road with Delaware, Missouri State. Last home game was Nevada, so it's going to be nice to be back in the friendly confines. The game is a blackout, so there should be a little extra energy with the team coming out in black. They're
yeah,
giving out black T-shirts. We've seen the Zombieland helmets have already been
nice.
released earlier this week. We're having a pregame concert. Blanco Brown, who's like a hip hop country artist. Not my cup of tea, but it's been something we've done now 4 years in a row. We've had a game that's had a pregame concert. It brings a lot more students out. There's a lot more energy and vibe to the atmosphere pregame wise. And as long as we can get those people, the students, et cetera, to come in the stadium, it should make for a pretty good environment inside as well. But as far as
I would say you mentioned the helmet. So several guys that we do the group show with, I told them you're going to be my next guest, and like 2-3 of them, oh, you got to have them send you a helmet. Those helmets are sweet, and they were all just raving about the lids you guys are going to be wearing. Yeah.
I say if I can get a helmet, I will give anyone else a helmet if I get extras. But I got the chrome behind me, but they've been retired.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, yeah.
But for this game, on our preview for FIU, I called this kind of the perfect game for us to get right. We've kind of been inconsistent. And this FIU team, I want to respect every opponent. I do. But just on paper, statistically, there's no reason we shouldn't beat them. And their 2 wins, you mentioned one of them, FCS, they're averaging 40 points per game. And their 3 losses, they're averaging 9 points per game. And their quarterback...
Yeah, they got shut out against Penn State. But,
their quarterback play has been inconsistent. Keewan Jenkins, more intercept.
And going into the year, he was the guy we thought if they were going to be successful, he would really have to have a good year. And he's just been so-so.
He's been a guy.
He's
been a guy that people were like, this could be the preseason player of the year, and he's got 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's made up for that with 4 rushing touchdowns as well. He's a versatile and a dual threat guy. But if your QB1 doesn't have a downfield threat to pass the ball, then you can kind of contain them and put them in a box and more easily win that game. So, but one of the things we Western Kentucky haven't done this year is we haven't come out the gate fast and put our pedal down, put our foot on somebody's throat in the first quarter. We've not done it. We've been scoreless in the first quarter several times. Not sure if we've scored on our first possession at all this year. If so, it's been a field goal. But we've been plagued by slow starts, and then slow starts allow teams that you should beat to hang around. The game starts grinding down. You're getting reliant on turnovers. You're relying on your running game. It just changes the whole flow and script of the game. Whereas if you come out fast, what we're known for, 2-3 touchdowns in that first quarter, you're making a team that doesn't throw the ball well. They have to throw the ball now.
They do.
And it puts you in a favorable position where your back end can make some plays. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. I think this is a good opportunity for us to show how good we can be against a team that we should take care of at home. We just have to play better than what we have so far this season.
Yeah. For those people out there, this is the updated standings in Conference USA. Hilltoppers at the top, and then I'd mentioned Jacksonville State before, Kennesaw State playing well. But I appreciate what you were just saying there about what you're looking for tomorrow, and hopefully they can get out to a quick start, get a touchdown, early minutes there, set the tone for that game. But I think you hit on it as well, that on paper this should be a W. This should be a game where you can take care of business, against a team who went through a lot of changes in the offseason and has, been 2-3 so far. Then around the conference, and looking forward to the rest of the way for WKU, we talked about all the rest of their games look winnable. You have at La Tech next week. Now, is it Tuesday or Wednesday next week that game is?
I want to say it's on Tuesday again. Just off the top of my head, I think it's a 7-day break.
Okay. And their game surprised me against Kennesaw. I thought La Tech would win, but I really didn't think they would get rolled as bad as they did. Jerry Mack is doing some good things at Kennesaw. It's another good hire, but I didn't expect them to show up like they did, in that game. So looking at around the conference, we'll touch on some of the other teams, but let's start with the two newcomers who we both mentioned. I feel like a lot of my regular viewers and a lot of our After Dark Network people, they're not going to know much about Delaware or Missouri State. Delaware's been a good team. Nick Minicucci has been running the ball very well, finding the end zone. Didn't he run for all 3 touchdowns against WKU in that game?
Yep, correct.
Yeah. You had mentioned before about, Jenkins, some people saying preseason conference player of the year. If Minicucci keeps putting up those rushing numbers, he's going to be a guy that has a chance to do that. But obviously WKU got a W against Delaware, but what's Delaware and Missouri State been doing right, so far, in this season?
I think the secret to both of those teams is they're both well coached. Missouri State with Ryan Beard, who WKU fans are very familiar with. He's a Bowling Green, Kentucky. He went to Bowling Green High School. He went to Western Kentucky, alum from both. Family still lives here. A lot of their staff members have coached here or played here at Western Kentucky. So there was a lot of mutual respect coming into that game. They're just well coached. He's a very cerebral coach. He's an up and coming coach. They played really well. They have good depth. You saw Jacob Clark, a 7th-year quarterback, get knocked out. They put in their backup quarterback, who, again, add in another Bowling Green, Kentucky tie. He's a Bowling Green High School alum, Deuce Bailey, and dual threat guy, can use his legs, extend plays. True freshman, was back there making some true freshman mistakes at the same time. But I know they want to preserve his red shirt. Jacob Clark, they need him back to down the stretch run. But they're a team that, even though they're not eligible for the Conference USA Championship bowl game, which I don't agree with that
I don't
ruling.
Either.
It's a silly punishment for a team moving up, but they are the type of team that can play spoiler to someone else down the line. They can absolutely beat you. They beat a Marshall team at Marshall earlier this season.
I was going to say me and my Marshall people know that well.
They're that tough team that if you let them hang around, they will get a victory on you. They'll pull a last second, touchdown drive. They make defensive stops. They're just well coached. And as they continue into the FBS and they build a deeper, bigger FBS roster, that's only going to get better for them. Like Ryan Beard's doing great things there. They need to hold on to him as long as they can, because he's that guy like a Helton, but 10, 15 years younger, that's going to win a lot and be an attractive candidate in the future. And then I would say the same thing about Delaware. They have really good resources. They have really good fan support. They're really well coached with Ryan Carty. And
Carty's a
then,
good coach, Delaware guy through and through. Was
yeah,
coached with Casey Keeler, played for so good
yeah,
guy. Yeah,
yeah. So, got supplanted to be QB1 by some guy named Joe Flacco many moons ago. And that ended pretty well for them and obviously for
yeah.
Flacco as well. But, Carty, I didn't know a lot about Delaware coming into the season. And then as I
I
got
don't
to
think anybody did.
yeah,
Yeah,
as I got to looking into them, I was like, man, they win a lot of ball games.
yeah,
But how tough was that competition? Then you get to looking into it, man, they're tough. They win every year, and then we played against them, and they're so well coached. They run this 3-3-5 defense.
yeah.
They're dropping 3 safeties. They forced us to run. Their offensive play calling was very varied. They weren't predictable. Just threw a lot of different looks, a lot of different, just things at you that kept your defense on its heels. Luckily, we had some turnovers that went into our favor. That fumble I mentioned earlier turned it into points, the pick 6. But that quarterback, Nick Minicucci, like you said, he's probably a front runner for Offensive Player of the Year himself in Maverick. That was a heck of a matchup, and he's tough. And I don't see any reason to believe that Delaware won't continue to be, a force in the future in Conference USA. They're a great addition, and they're the same as Missouri State. They can play spoiler to somebody between now and the end of the season that wants to make a conference championship game appearance. I'm glad we have the W on our side against them because they're going to go spoil someone else's hope and give them a second or a third loss and boot them out of the championship game because they're tough.
Could be Jacksonville State this week.
Yeah, that's going to be a matchup. That one's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Then, looking at the other side of the standings, Sam Houston just can't seem to get many things right. They're really struggling in year 1 under Phil Longo. Middle Tennessee State is another one. They're at 1-5. They had beat Nevada but lost to Austin P. Never good when you're losing FCS games. Derek Mason might not make it to year 3 there. I could see him being a guy who is let go after this year. UTEP, the Scotty Walden hire was interesting, but clearly this year, they're 1-5 as well, and their only win was an FCS game. Though UTEP Sam Houston this week, something has to give. Someone has to get a win. So we will we'll see who gets the win. UTEP Sam Houston.
The guys at the bottom, there's been so much coaching turnover in this league over the last 3 years. Coming into this year, that was one of the factors when I was trying to figure out who's the conference favorites. The 3 teams that stood out the most to me were us, Liberty, and La Tech, just because we had the most continuity with our coaching. And I thought I knew what to expect. Liberty's obviously fallen off a little bit, but they're still mathematically they're in the race. They can still make a run and make a conference championship game 100%. They have the talent. They have the coaching ability. They've had some injuries with Ethan Vasco. They haven't played their best football, just like I can say the same thing about us. They've just been on the losing end of things. The other guys on the other end of the spectrum, the Sam Houston, Phil Longo experience, I wasn't sure about that hire when they made it, and so far it's looked not pretty. The Scotty Walden at UTEP, man, big rah-rah guy, brings a lot of energy to the sideline, a lot of energy to recruiting. I was honestly surprised that he got out of Tennessee when he was available. Middle Tennessee was also looking to replace Rick Stockstill, and I was surprised they didn't call it like, hey, here's a guy from Austin P that won a lot of ball games, and they didn't give him a shot. For whatever reason, he ended up at UTEP. It's not working out yet. They're recruiting well, not winning.
They are. At Marshall, we just hired a new athletic director this year, and it was the guy that was at Austin P who hired Walden.
Harrison from Austin P. And now y'all got a football game in the future with them. I saw, not y'all, but Marshall does. I think that's great for both sides. And then Middle Tennessee, with Derek Mason, they have just been so average and so middle for so long now.
Yeah.
Dating back to 6-6 Rick. They would get to the bowl game, they'd go to the Bahamas or to the Hawaii Bowl or wherever, and Massaro and McPhee and all those were happy, and they'd extend him. A couple years ago, decided to let Rick Stockstill go, and I just think in today's day and age in coaching with the transfer portal, there's a lot less forgiveness in not turning it around quicker. Used to they would say, "Hey, we're going to give you 5 years. You need at least 3 to get your guys fully in here, so we know what you're bringing to the table, scheme wise, roster wise, and can you win ball games." You used to have that luxury, but now if you're not turning it around in year 1 and showing improvement, and then in year 2 you're the same or worse, like you said, it's almost hard to justify. Are you going to make it to a year 3? And a couple of those guys are probably on a warm seat at this point.
Yeah, and I didn't let when they let Stockstill go. I thought that was a mistake. Now they were average, a mediocre-ish team, but for a school like that, any G5 school, that bowl money is very important. He had them fairly stable. They've regressed a lot since he's been gone, and you wonder if they wish they would have kept him.
And what he was doing with the lack of resources they were providing him. Now they've went and built a football facility. Now they're investing in the program, and they still need stadium upgrades, etc. That should have been done 20 years ago. But when you put yourself that far behind the 8 ball, and I've heard horror stories about their weight rooms, their locker rooms, their facilities in general, and he was still somehow getting talent to come there. The Kevin Byers of the world.
Yep.
He's had several good quarterbacks come through there. Dasher and Vadiato was a quarterback of his, and they've always been competitive and tough when he was there. Versus now, they're a 3-win ball team, if that. I don't know if they're going to get the 3 wins. And in the transfer portal NIL era, he had a lot of success for the resources that he had, and hindsight might be 2020. They might be sorry they got rid of him, especially if they know what they're getting now with Derek Mason.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
His boy was a decent QB for him too, Brent. He was a solid QB.
Honestly, and he was on staff with him as QB, and I think he might have been like co-OC or something. I really thought at some point there was just going to be a handing of the baton, and it was going to go straight from Rick to Brent, and we were going to have like a 40-year Stockstill coaching tree over there at middle. But that obviously fell apart. But yeah, he was a competitor, man. He was a warrior out there.
Yeah. And but just tough to say enough about how successful he was over the long term, and with the limited resources, getting them to respectability, which people probably didn't appreciate till he was gone, and you don't have that anymore. Another one who, talking about the changes there, and in one of my preseason rankings I did for every conference was I'd rank the head coaches out. And you had mentioned there's been so much movement in coaching. This was the weirdest conference to rank the head coaches for. Like, I found myself, because of the people all over, I think I had Simmons and Mack at 3 and 4, just because they were at least successful at another level, where you had Helton and Chadwell were easily 1-2. That was easy. But after that, I like Sonny Cumbie. He hadn't won games up until this year. Carty and Beard, it was tough because they, had been at a lower level. And the guys who had been coaching for a long time, like Mason, you weren't that, your record wasn't good. So in fact, I'll show, and this was preseason, done in the summer, but this is where I had the coaches ranked out, in certainly I would flop Chadwell and Helton, in the season at this point. Charles Kelly's doing better than I thought he would year 1. Tony Sanchez is doing better than I thought he would. But yeah, that's
I think
that's where we were at.
An interesting one on there is Sonny Cumbie, because they went back-to-back 3-9 seasons. Then they had 5-7 season last year. It's almost surprising that he got to this year 4.
Yeah.
And now that they've started out this year 4 hot. They look like,
Yes.
until last week losing to Kennesaw State, they look like the team to beat with their defense just causing havoc, creating turnovers, scoring points off those turnovers. They really just needed their offense to catch up and be just formidable, put points on the board to allow their defense to get some rest. And I think that's kind of what we saw come to a head against Kennesaw. And Jerry Mack has done a fabulous job. Did not expect them to turn it around in year 1 that quick. But again, that kind of points to what we just talked about with Derek Mason. You can turn over your roster so fast now in the portal era that there's a lot less forgiveness. And we saw Tyson Helton take a 3-9 team 7 years ago and go 9-3 his first season at Western Kentucky before it is what it is today. And now Jerry Mack, I think Willie Simmons was a great hire. He's going to turn FIU around. I know that. Year 1 growing pains, but Jerry Mack has absolutely been the surprise of the season and the offseason so far. Not that he's having success, but really that it's happening so fast.
Exactly. I mean, you had a guy who did very well at the FCS level, was running backs coach at Tennessee, then with the Jacksonville Jaguars last year, seen everything, been at lots of different levels. But based on what we'd seen from Bohannon and that squad last year, I didn't think it would happen as quick as it has. And the Cumbie one, you were right, like the back-to-back 3-win seasons, won 5. I think in looking at the coaches here, in ranking them, kind of my thought process with him was, okay, year 4, that's when the squad should be fully yours. The guys are all yours. The system should be in place. If we're ever going to see a jump forward, it's going to happen in year 4. And if it didn't happen this year, he would have gotten fired. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to win enough games. One of my hot takes in the summer, that was they'll be a 7 or 8 win team, which they hadn't been close to that before. But seeing a lot of good things out of Cumbie.
They were 5-7 last year, and if I recall correctly, they played in 6 one-score ball games. And I want to say lost most of those. So, they were just a play here and there away from being an 8-9 win team last year. Yeah. And his seat was so warm from a fan perspective, man. Like all the Louisiana Tech people I follow and know were just like, he's got to go. And the funny thing about Cumbie is he kind of ties into Western Kentucky a little bit, because before he was head coach at Louisiana Tech, he was offensive coordinator at Texas Tech in 2021. And we had Zach Kitley was our offensive coordinator here. Zach Kitley is a Texas Tech alum. And the only job in the nation that I was worried about losing Zach Kitley to was Texas Tech. And when Louisiana Tech decided to hire Sonny Cumbie from Texas Tech, I think all of us braced like, man, there goes Zach Kitley. It's just funny. It all kind of comes full circle. Obviously, it turned out okay for us. We had Ben Arbuckle in the wings, and he was groomed very nicely for that position to be ready. But it's just funny how it all is full circle. There's kind of a 6 degrees of the coaching trees at all times, basically.
And for the O coordinator now, Rick Bowie, a lot of people don't know as much about him. Can you tell the audience about his background a little, what he's about?
Yeah, I mean, he's just been high power offense everywhere he's been. He's still a younger coach. In the offseason, right before the season started, just had his first child, on a personal level. So he's a younger 30s offensive coordinator at the FBS level. Most recently at Abilene Christian, just a top 5 offense there. Scoring wise, passing wise, also had a really good run game there too. I think that was one of the most exciting things when we hired him, is that has been a major weakness for Western Kentucky through the Helton eras. We've never had an established running game that is a threat and takes the burden off the passing game, because they're complementary of each other. If you have a good running game, it's going to open up things in the passing game, and vice versa. If you can pass, it's going to open up things on the front for the running game. we've not been very balanced in that regard for years. And when we hired Rick Bowie from Abilene Christian and just saw his success and his resume, and obviously him bringing Maverick over doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
It didn't hurt anybody's feelings at all. But we just saw an opportunity for us to get better on offense as a whole, and he has certainly delivered on that. Even though there's been growing pains, there's been inconsistencies. A lot of that's just self-inflicted execution stuff, on the field in the moment. I mentioned penalties earlier.
Yeah.
I think we're averaging 7 penalties for 70 plus penalty yards a game. That's very un-Helton team like. Usually we're one of the lower penalized teams in the nation. And most of those penalties, when you go back and you're watching games, it's those third and short, third and mediums that all of a sudden become third and longs.
36.
Yeah, or negate a big play up the field with a holding. Just the drive killers, the momentum killers, bringing plays back, killing drives, and you're giving the ball back to the other team. That's why I consistently say we haven't played our best ball game. We've left so much meat on the bone, and we still have looked pretty good. If you look at our offensive stats, the metrics, our red zone offense versus our red zone defense, like we stack up very well. We can win a lot of ball games. But man, I still think our best football is still in front of us over these next, 6, 7, hopefully 8 football games that we have left.
Yeah, one of the things, that you would touch on it, but that impressed me the most about Rick Bowie and reading up on him was before Abilene, he was at Valdosta State, one of the best D2 programs in the country, and they were top 25 in both rushing and passing. That's really impressive and tough to do. I mean, you got to get a lot of yards doing both things to be at that level, and that's impressive.
Yeah, I really thought, and it's not. Again, we've not been as balanced as I thought we would be. We're still like a 70-30 pass to rush mix, but we've shown over the last 3 games, Nevada, Missouri State, Delaware, we've shown that we have the guys in the running back room that can lead us to victories if we need to lean on them. And I think down the stretch, I think we need to lean on them more intentionally because they've shown they can do it. And it's only going to open up things in the passing game, whether it's across the middle, whether it's those deep shots, whatever it is. It's complementary. It's yin and yang. Yep. It all goes together. And if you listen to Rick Bowie in his weekly press conferences that he does, before every week game, he's very adamant about talking about that, about just being efficient with plays and looking at yards per play and success rates and putting guys in position to succeed. None of that stuff is foreign to him. He's obviously a very smart, very bright young coach. And then meshing him with somebody like Helton, who's been doing it for quite a while, is, in my opinion, is 2 great offensive minds coming together, making each other better. And hopefully that's just gonna pay off for us with some wins down the line here.
Yeah, and hopefully they can, learn, like you said, learn from each other and adapt what they're doing to be even better. So one of the things we always talk about, and I always ask the guests here when we're talking about the rest of the conference, is your prediction. What 2 teams play in the conference title game? I'd probably go WKU and Jacksonville State, which is in the summer I did say WKU and Liberty. I think like most people did. I've switched. I think I'm going to go WKU Jacksonville State. But who do you think will be the 2 teams that meet up in the conference title game?
I think that would probably be the 3rd year in a row that WKU and Liberty have been the media darlings, the odd-on talking favorites to be in the conference title game, and it's worked out. Liberty won it a couple years ago. We played in it last year. We lost to a really good Jacksonville State team.
They were good.
I think it's still anyone's game right now. Obviously, we're in a favorable position. Currently 3-0 in conference. Only one of 2 teams that have played 3 conference games, undefeated. Staring down the barrel of hopefully a 4-0 start here if we can get past FIU here at home. I have to put us there at this point. I think we can do enough to get there. There's not a conference game left. Louisiana Tech's going to be tough. They have a great defense, but they also just put something on tape that they're beatable. Kennesaw State went and took care of them. I don't think anybody saw that coming. And then my other pick besides us would probably be also Jacksonville State, and
Okay.
their rushing offense is just so deadly. Coming into
Cam
the
Cook
season,
is very good. Cam Cook's good.
coming into the season, they had a quarterback one in Gavin Wimsatt that I wasn't sold on personally. I just looked at his career stats, and he's a 40% completion guy,
Yeah.
a negative touchdown to interception ratio. Now they've pulled him out. He's not their starter at this point as we talk, and they have Creel in there as their starting quarterback, who was their backup.
Playing well.
Yeah, and he's their punt returner. So it looks to me like they went from a quarterback that couldn't throw to a quarterback that doesn't want to throw. He wants to get out on the edge and run. Cam Cook will give you 200. Cody Creel will give you another, $120. They're liable to run for 400 yards against you. And when you run that kind of offense, that ball control, that possession control, it limits your opportunities to score against them. I think it very well could be like last year where we play them, game 12 of the season, then we turn around and play them hopefully at our place this year instead of at their place. But I very well think the script could be very similar to last year, and it's the same two teams. And with their running offense and then our troubles with run defense, it could be a matchup. But they've also shown that their run defense is not very good. I think they're like in the 100s as far as run defense. So they certainly can be scored on as well. They're 2-0, but they just barely scraped by and won their last game. And I think that's kind of what every team in conference has done, is every team has shown chinks in the armor where you can get beat on any given Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, whenever you're playing, but you better be playing your best football come November, heading into December for that conference championship game if you want to win that title.
Absolutely. No, I think that's well said. We'll kind of transition to our last segment here. You're just talking about some coaching stuff. I mean, we've already, done that a bit, but we obviously have some big openings around the country. And recently, Penn State, Oregon State, and UAB all opened up yesterday. So that's, big news there. Penn State, obviously the biggest opening we have so far. They certainly have been disappointing this year, but going into this year, James Franklin had won 34 games in 3 years. I was surprised they made that decision when they did.
Yeah, kind of crazy, coming off, what they've done the last couple of years, won a lot of bowl games, conference or college football playoff, nearly every single year. Granted, they've had a bad year, 3-3, just lost to a Northwestern team they probably shouldn't have lost to. I think that's fair to say, but given the expectations there, I understand why it happened. In this season, their quarterback one just went down, obviously making a coaching change. I don't know what the rest of the season will look like, but a $50 million buyout, with a guy that it was a known entity. He almost just kind of had that Helton syndrome, but on a bigger level. He just never could get over the hump and win the big game. And a lot of fans like myself from afar look at everything he's done like, man, that's a pretty good resume. That looks pretty fun to watch, a lot of winning ball games. But I guess, the people there living in it, he just wasn't winning enough and wasn't winning that big game to get them over the hump. And that's an expensive change to make. And obviously I hope it works out for them, but it's anybody's guess who you're going to hire next. It could be, the next, I don't mean to do this to Sam Houston, but it could be your next Phil Longo.
Yeah.
Or it could be Jerry Mack, and it could turn around and be successful year one. So it's a crapshoot at that level. They've got resources and money to burn and to give. The coach has to put it all together, though.
Yeah. And it's one of those scenarios where if you're firing a guy at that level who's had that much success, that's only the first part. The second part of that, you have to make sure you hire a guy who's going to be better than him. It's going to be really difficult to be better than him based on his overall record. just because he's won so many ball games. Now, sure, you're going to have to, beat those elite teams, which he wasn't doing. But those are elite teams for a reason. Not many people beat Ohio State. Not many people are winning against Notre Dame and those top 5 teams. Those teams are at that level for a reason. Are you sure you're going to get a guy who can beat those teams? Not many do. It's tough.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. And the coaching carousel in general is just there's so many openings that, and what it turns into is that domino effect as they go hire a coach from a G5 level, and now that G5's got to go hire a coach, and the dominoes that fall. It certainly in the end it could affect WKU the way it shakes out.
Yeah, certainly. And we'll have openings. We have Penn State, Virginia Tech, Arkansas, Oklahoma State, UCLA, Oregon State, UAB. Stanford's going to be open. We know they're on an interim. Like those, for this, usually at this point in October, we don't have 8 openings that we know are going to be available. That's for this time of year. It's a lot. And that domino effect is always fun to see. We'll see what happens.
The one that happened yesterday, I guess, kind of closest to us here at Western Kentucky being UAB, former conference mate. The interesting thing about that, and I know you've already seen some conversation about it on Twitter, is Tyson Helton's name's already been brought up with UAB. It was brought up 3 years ago before they hired Trent Dilfer. If you go to X and you search in Tyson Helton now, it's mentioned several times by UAB fans. Like, man, we'd love to get him. The ties are there. He coached there as a position coach, quarterbacks and running backs from 2007 to 2012. Perception wise, it may be looked as a little bit of a step up. Pay wise, he's making about $900,000 here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I think Trent Dilfer is around 1.3. Probably plus some other incentives and bonuses there. So, it's one of those positions where I think they certainly will call and make Tyson Helton say no, like he did a few years ago. Whether they try to sweeten the pot from, whatever the pitch was a few years ago, I'm not sure exactly how much they'll throw or can throw or will throw because, they have a buyout that they've got to pay for Trent as well. But, it's a domino. And as soon as that happened, it already started chatter and discourse among WKU fans that obviously none of us know if he's gone or if he will go or he will consider it, but 100% there will be contact by UAB. They will make him at least say no. He will be on their short list because going through what they went through the last 2.5 years, they're not going to make another gamble hire on a high school coach, certainly, or a coordinator that's never been a head coach, the young up-and-comer, hot shot, or a Scotty Walden from the FCS type call-up. That's one. They're going to want somebody experienced that they know can win games, that they know can navigate the portal and the NIL world that we're in today. And that
guy I had mentioned, I commented on your post on Twitter was before they hired Dilfer, their interim was Brian Vincent. He's done pretty well at ULM. I wonder if he's a guy that they give a call to and probably regret not making him the head coach in the first place when he was the interim.
Glasgow, Kentucky native right there, about 40 minutes up the road from Bowling Green is Brian Vincent. I'm sure hindsight's 20/20 on that one because, like you said, he's been real successful at ULM, and it's no secret what their resources are down there. And he's competing and being successful there. UAB deserves better. They should be better, and it'll be interesting.
I believe Vincent is the lowest paid FCS or FBS head coach. I think he's about $600,000 a year. I think that's the lowest in all of FBS.
Yeah, hindsight maybe 20/20 for UAB.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting opening. I don't know what they'll do. One thing I'll do this year, we're approaching our hour mark. I always leave with these 2 questions. One of them is expected, the other one's not as much. In Conference USA, the conference you're dealing with, what coach right now is on the hottest seat?
the coach on the hottest seat right now, it's hard to say just one. I
It
think
is.
realistically, I think there's three, and I think it's Scotty Walden and Derek Mason are kind of right there neck and neck, just because they're still year two, but they've had zero success. They haven't grown from last year. So that's kind of the reason why their seat is warm or getting warmer as they're sitting on it. The other one, surprisingly, which I don't think it'll come to anything, it's certainly not going to come to fruition this offseason, has been Jamie Chadwell, just because the expectations at Liberty are so high. They
Yep.
were in a New Year's Six Bowl just 2 years ago with an undefeated 13-0 season, and now they've regressed every year since then, um, and just haven't looked good offensively. Lost a lot of players defensively. It may just be the fan chatter, but fan chatter often turns into fan support, people show up to games, etc. Luckily, they have such a large fan base and donor base, alumni base, that the Twitter chatter is probably just a small percentage of that, but there are a large contingent, just on social media wise, of fans that are not happy with where they're at, and they have high expectations. That's all it boils down
They
to. You
do.
have high
Yep.
expectations, high standards, and you're not meeting them, and we're paying you $4 or $5 million a year, far and away the highest paid coach in Conference USA.
Oh yeah.
You better be competing for a title year in and year out, because their NIL resources are head and shoulders above the rest of us. Their roster, coach, support staff, facilities, everything should have them at the top of this conference year in and year out. And right now they're not there. So it's understandable for
Yeah.
that one to be chatter wise. I don't think anything's going to come of it, but chatter
Yeah.
wise, there's some, the burners on pilot at least about to come on, from the fan
And
perspective.
and for them, like you said, different expectations. If they don't make the conference title game, that's a disappointing year for them. They're expecting to be one of those two teams every year. Even last year, they only lost 4 games. That was a disappointment, in a lot of their minds.
Yeah, I mean it's a
Yeah,
good problem to have that
it
high
is.
expectations, and
Yeah,
historically they've won a lot of ball games in recent years, so they have good reason to have those expectations and
yeah,
those standards. And as they've went from independent to now Conference USA, and they poured a lot of money into everything around the football program, they don't expect that to plateau and fall off. They expect that to continue to rise, and this season's been a tough start for them, but we've mentioned it a couple times. They still are not. They're not mathematically
no,
eliminated. They
they're
still
not.
could run the table and be right there at the end of the year. They
Yeah,
certainly have the coaching talent and the roster talent to do it. And there's certainly no game left on their schedule that they can't win. But I think Conference USA has also shown that there's probably not no game left on their schedule that they also can't lose.
yeah, they don't have automatic wins either. Yeah, to go
Exactly. So
along
if
with that.
they're playing
Yeah,
inconsistent, not good football, um, it could turn out to be an ugly season for them. And then the real burner might really get turned up from the admin side of things,
yeah,
behind closed doors.
certainly. Yeah, I think if I had to pick one, I'd probably lean Derek Mason, for that hot seat. But all three of those guys, you brought up good points for. Now, the second question I ask about your conference coaches is, which coach do you think is most likely to get a bigger job in it, whether it be P4 or Blue Blood? Which coach in the conference is the most likely to get a bigger job?
I think most likely, I think that would almost have to come down to Tyson Helton. And
Yeah,
really, it's more because so many of the coaches are within their first 3 years and unknowns, or
yeah,
they're in their first year, Simmons and Mack, um, and just maybe they're going to get it done, maybe they're going to get it
yeah,
there. But for someone to consider you for, whether it's a low tier P4 job,
exactly. Yeah,
you need to show some sustained success and winning, rather than just 1 year flash in the pan. Like Kennesaw State could run the table the rest of the year, be in the conference championship, and win the conference championship. I don't think that would mean Coach Mack is gone.
no.
Now,
And
if
I
he
would
turn,
say, yeah, to you, I think right now it has to be Helton.
yeah,
But I think Mac would also be an acceptable answer with the caveat of it doesn't happen this year. It happens in, after next year, after year
Right.
3.
Yeah. If he shows he can do it a couple years in a row with his track record already, like you mentioned earlier, he's already done it. Prairie and or was that Simmons? Am I getting mixed up on where Mac came
Simmons was
from?
Prairie View and
And
FAMU.
FAMU. Yeah.
Mac was North Carolina Central.
That's right, NC
Yeah.
Central. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
both of those guys have pedigrees of winning and turning programs around.
Yeah.
But at some point, when you move up, you have to show that sustained success, and that you can do it with the portal and NIL, and just all the variables that come at this level. If he does it 2 years in a row at Kennesaw, then I could see him moving up.
Yeah.
Kind of like Jeff Brom did several years ago when we won back-to-back conference championships. Purdue, admittedly kind of a lower level P4 team, came and plucked him away for 3x, 4x the money we were paying him. Hard to blame the guy. So,
and he took Purdue to a conference title game.
yeah. I mean, they upset Ohio State at Purdue. I mean, it was he had a good, not great tenure there. But you're going to Purdue where the expectations are so low. You just need to go win some ball games. And
I might even argue for Purdue, it was bordering on great.
Yeah.
And since going back 60 years to the early 60s, him and Joe Tiller are the only two coaches they've had there with a net winning record.
Exactly. And, and now that's parlayed into, the U of L job, which I think was kind of always his circle closing, his destiny being, the Brahms are from the Louisville area. He played there. His brother played there. It was destined to happen at some point that he would be at U of L. And now, he's being pretty successful at U of L as well. He can recruit, he can coach, good offensive game planner. He's a fun coach. He's been one to keep up with as a former WKU guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. But that wraps up our time here. But just want to say thanks for having you. I've liked following your stuff on Topper Talk. They're one of the most fun programs in the country to follow, especially, not many G5 teams have had the success over time that you guys have, mixed with, the fun offenses and having a lot of those, quarterbacks we mentioned, receivers like, Jareth Stearns that just put up ridiculous numbers, in the past, and all the coaches, something I personally really enjoyed. But Topper Talk, I will link all of your stuff there for our users so they can, find and, easily follow you, get in touch with you in those spaces. But want to say thank you for being here and good luck the rest of the season.
All right. I appreciate you having me, man. I'm always open and game to talking WKU sports, football,
Awesome.
etc. So anytime you need a big red or a towel waving representative, I'm one call away. I'm glad to do it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And everybody out there, have a great day.